My guest tonight is an American veteran professional journalist, independent, I might add. She has 35 years in print and broadcast newsrooms. She's a regular on Yahoo News, Counterpunch, Truth Out. She partners with our friend Rick Walker on Maverick News from Canada. And she has, and there's others that she's a regular, including the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. She has her own podcast called Strange Bedfellows on Rumble. Lori Spencer from Norman, Oklahoma. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Regis. Great to see you. Thanks for having me today.
It's been a long time in coming. We've it's been
Yeah,
months since we've tried to hook up.
I
So
know.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad to have you. I
The
know
time
it's early.
difference, yeah, the time difference makes it difficult. It's
Oh
early
my God, I
morning
know.
here.
Yeah, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I know, and it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon here. It's always a problem. All right, let's get right to it. Um, the big news for many people here where I live in Crimea and the Russian Federation is that the United States Congress refused to give Zelensky more money. This was on his trip to Washington, D.C. He had hoped to speak again before the joint session of Congress, but was refused. He basically went home empty handed and then went to Canada. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Because of this, uh, McCarthy was ousted as Speaker of the House, and the Republicans now are looking to find somebody who will oppose any further spending. But on top of that, Biden is like tripling down.
Hmm.
It is said that he is scheming to find another $100 billion to send to Ukraine. Lori, from your position, where you're sitting, what's your take on all of this?
I think it's pretty remarkable and long overdue. But you have to remember that for the longest time, all the Republicans, with the exception of a small minority, uh, always voted for more support, more aid for Ukraine. So this was a major turning point. We're starting to get more votes to turn against the Ukraine spending. And to be honest with you, I think the reason for that is it's an election year. And they know that this war is increasingly unpopular with the American people as we see our country falling apart, our infrastructure falling apart. The tent cities under every bridge are getting larger. Our homeless problem, our border problem. We have so many major problems in this country that are not being attended to, and we would like to see our money spent on those things rather than on a war that most Americans can't even find Ukraine on a map. To be honest with you, most Americans don't care about this war. When you look at the polls and the top issues that are on the minds of voters in this election year, foreign policy, and that includes the war in Ukraine, rates less than 2% on the minds of Americans. So, a few Republicans in Congress figured that out and decided to put their finger on the pulse of America at last. And I, for one, was overjoyed to see Matt Gaetz on the floor of Congress last week raising hell about it. And, I was glad to see McCarthy go. It's about time.
Okay, we're talking politics here because I agree. I think there's an election that's on the horizon. In fact, all of the contenders are now campaigning. Um, Robert F. Kennedy, who is you're working for his campaign, I guess, as a volunteer.
Hmm.
He's decided not to run as a Democrat, but an independent. He is railing against many of these same issues, this funding for Ukraine. He'd like to see a peaceful end to this conflict. I don't think there will be one. And then you have Donald Trump and others who are savagely attacking Joe Biden and his administration. Trump is bragging that he'll end this thing in 24 hours. The other candidates are also pretty much against Biden. Some of them still favor more aid to Ukraine. But give me your thoughts on Kennedy, who's definitely, I think, going to take votes away from Biden. Trump, who right now, in spite of all the bullshit legal problems that they're throwing up in his face, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the DNC, I think if they held the election today, he would win just on these critiques of Joseph Biden in the war in Ukraine. What are your thoughts?
Well, the polls agree with you. All of the polls that I've seen quite recently show that Trump has a pretty substantial lead over Biden, 3 to 5 points, depending on which poll you look at. So that's close, but he's pulling ahead. Now, Kennedy coming into the race as a third party or independent candidate is the wild card. And what everyone's wondering right now is, who is he going to take votes from the most? Who's he going to hurt the most? I think he's going to take a lot of votes from Donald Trump. I actually think he will take more votes from Trump than he will from Joe Biden. Most Democrats in this country really don't like Bobby Kennedy. The Democratic Party doesn't like him. They don't agree on the issues at all. And a lot of them think Kennedy's a wacky conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer, and every bad thing that that he could possibly be. But the Republicans really, really like him. I know a lot of Trump voters myself. I'm here in Oklahoma, in the heart of Trump country. And when I talk to my neighbors, most of whom voted for Trump twice, they're taking a good long look at Robert Kennedy, and they really like what they see. So Trump should be worried about Robert Kennedy. And, you know, this is going to be a sea change in American politics. Today, Robert Kennedy is making a very important announcement, as you know, in Philadelphia, in the cradle of American liberty. And I can't disclose what he's going to announce, but let's just say it'll be big news. And yes, most people are expecting him to turn independent or third party and to divorce the Democratic Party, which has been his party all his life. But he's leaving because this party doesn't like him, doesn't want him. They've already sent him every signal that they possibly can that they don't want him, and they're rigging the primaries to make sure that he can't get a fair shot. So there's really only one thing to do, and that's leave. And mind you, the Kennedys have been Democrats since the 1930s. You know, his grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, worked in the FDR administration. It would be a huge thing for Kennedy to leave the Democratic Party, and he really didn't want to. When he got into the race, he was hoping to clean up the mess that's the Democratic Party. He was trying to reform it, but he soon found out 6 months in the race that it's just impossible. You can't fix the Democratic Party. You can't change the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party changes you.
Yeah, well, I've been one of those people who has not participated in elections in the United States since Barack Obama. Just he turned out to be a chameleon. You know, you listen to his words if you wish, but watch what he does.
Right.
And he is a consummate liar. I think the worst president the United States has ever had. I think he's a fascist. He's a globalist. And well, and so I'm just saying, I don't participate. I haven't participated in elections, and I think they're fraudulent. I think this whole idea about electronic voting and mail-in votes is so easy to rig, and it's been proven. I think Donald Trump proved it, but they attacked him so viciously. My personal opinion is that I think that he beat Joe Biden in that election. And I'm not a Trump advocate by any means.
Right.
But
Right.
this is my question. Do you think that with Robert Kennedy and Trump, the two, I think, best well known, they have name recognition. Do you think that they will make this issue of Ukraine and the war and funding to Ukraine the major foreign policy issue in the election and in the debates going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you that Bobby Kennedy certainly will. I know that it's one of the driving reasons why he's running for president right now. And to Trump's credit, and I'm obviously not a Trump voter, but to his credit, pretty much every video he's been putting out lately, every statement, especially since we've seen things, heat up in the Middle East, we've seen Israel declare war on Hamas. Trump is just trying to stop a nuclear war. To his credit, he's making it clear that the more this escalates, it's World War III, folks. And that's something that he does not want. I will say that Trump has always been anti nukes. He has a strong track record on that. He fears nuclear war, and he just wants to, as he says, stop the killing over there in Russia and Ukraine and in the Middle East. I will say Trump was a president of peace, and he did keep us out of war. So I think that that's why we're going to see a groundswell of support for Kennedy and for Trump in this race. And Joe Biden's policies are failing, and he doesn't seem to care.
I don't think Joe Biden knows where he is most of the time.
That's right. That's
And
right. I think Joe's just taking orders.
I think I'll tell you this. Here in the Russian Federation, ordinary people look at him as a joke. They say you must be so embarrassed, and then they all know, and this is coming from the Russian Federation from the very top, whether it's Putin speaking or Medvedev or Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson for the foreign ministry. They are all declaring that Joe Biden is not in charge, that there are powerful forces above him and everybody else in his White House that are calling the shots. The people here know that. Now, I really didn't want to get into American politics because it's not my area of interest, really. I'm concerned about what's happening in America. But I was very disappointed with Bobby when he first came out. He was condemning Russia, the same old bullet points. Putin is an assassin. Right. I communicated with his campaign, tried to. I communicated with people who are friends of his and have access to him. And I said, he's got to change the narrative because he's got it all wrong. I encouraged him through others to look at the history of the provocations of the United States against Russia. And I will go back to World War II, but especially since Ronald Reagan and the evil empire, the soulless country, Americans have been so propagandized that I thought, Bobby, you should know better. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to debate this now with you, but it was just, I know he's changed his tone a bit, but it really troubles me as somebody who's spent the last 8 years trying to find out for myself what Russia is really like.
Exactly.
And I came here to finish a film, my film 30 Seconds to Midnight, which was basically about the fear of the imminent existential threat of nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And I found nothing at all like what I had been taught all of my life about Russia. And Russia is not the Soviet Union. I'd like a couple of quick thoughts from you on Bobby's current policy and statements about Russia and the war in Ukraine.
Sure. When he first entered the race as a Democrat, perhaps he was just saying what he thought he had to say. Let's remember, we are in a new Cold War. And in the United States, unfortunately, nobody is going to get elected dog catcher if they say nice things about Russia, if they praise Russia, if they take the side of Russia, which is terribly unfortunate, but it's a reality of our politics, just as it was during the Cold War of the 20th century. Certainly no pro-Soviet politician would get elected to anything. So he has to temper his comments. He has to be extremely careful what he says. I too was extremely disappointed when I heard him say things like Putin is a thug, Putin is a criminal. And the main reason that I objected and the argument that I made to Bobby was, look, whoever the next president of the United States is going to be, if you say that you're a man of peace and you want to end the war, you're going to be in the role of mediator between these two warring nations. You can't really take sides when you're a mediator. You have to be fair. You have to be fair to both sides. You have to show compassion and understanding to both sides. How can you possibly sit down at the negotiating table with the guy that you just called a thug and a criminal? That's not going to work, is it, Bobby? So, maybe he gave that some thought. He has dialed those comments back. And, he's had several pro-Russian commentators on his podcast, people like my friend Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor. They tend to favor Russia in this conflict. I think he has to be careful in an election year in the United States. This is a new Cold War, unfortunately.
What I had suggested, Lori, that Bobby Kennedy ought to do what his uncle did and have that back channel communication with Nikita Khrushchev at the most critical moment in the history of the world at that time. And he ought to somehow get the message across, whether it's a messenger like his father did, like his uncle did, and then direct contact with Vladimir Putin and say, look, this is what's going on. This is what I'm trying to do. If I'm elected president, you and I can work together, just like Nikita and my uncle did, to preserve life and humanity on this planet. Those are amazing days. And I had hoped that Bobby Kennedy might do something like that. And I can tell you this, if he were elected, and whether he is elected or not, I think that he should come to Moscow and meet with Putin.
I do too.
And just like his uncle said, ich bin Berliner, he should say, ja, Russia. Those are my feelings, because I lived through that whole period.
Yeah.
I'm 78 years old. I remember distinctly what was going on. Anyway, let's move on, because there'll be a lot more to say about the American elections coming up. And
I hope that happens too, Regis. I honestly, truly do. I hope that he has a back channel open right now. What I've been saying all along is to all of the presidential candidates, to Trump, to Biden, and to Bobby, is, they're all promising peace after the next election. Trump says he'll end the war in 24 hours if he's elected, in January of 2025. What I've been saying all along is, why are you waiting that long? I mean, you've got a phone. You've got your own plane, Mr. Trump. You're the only politician in the Western world who has not flown over there to Ukraine to visit Zelensky. And while you're there, why don't you go over to Moscow and meet with Putin as well? Is there any reason why you can't just pick up the phone? If you don't want to fly there, we've got this thing called Zoom. You could just do a Zoom call or something, anything, some kind of dialogue. Why are we putting it off while hundreds of thousands more are going to die between now and January of 2025?
If anybody could pick up the phone and talk to Vladimir Putin, it's Trump. He already
Yep.
knows him. They've had many conversations,
Exactly.
formal, informal, private. Uh, and I wouldn't be surprised if Trump has been on the telephone with Vladimir Putin. But that's another
Everyone's
topic.
afraid, though, Regis, that these American politicians, they're all terrified to be seen with Putin, to let it be known that they might have spoken to Putin. They're terrified to pick up the phone. And after everything they did to Trump, right? I mean, they impeached him over this Ukraine stuff
Yeah,
back in
yeah, yeah. The
2019.
telephone call, unbelievable.
Yeah, Russiagate and all that. I mean, they scared Trump back into his corner. He's terrified to speak to Putin now, which is unfortunate.